Mr. Robert Mitchell, when you think of the World War II era, what are the first things that come to your mind?
Airplanes going over all the time.
Airplanes. Where did you live?
We lived at Harmon,
In
Arkansas.
In Harmon, Arkansas.
Right, and there was a lot of airplanes that flew over, and we were not too far from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that's when my brother had joined the Air Force. I was real young, and I knew that he was flying, and so I was interested in airplanes.
So Now Harmon, Arkansas is, just to help folks knowing where it is in the state, it's close to Town, is that right?
It is 5 miles west of Town.
So between Town and
Siloam
Springs.
Yes.
And there was at the time, during the war, there was an airstrip in Siloam Springs, I think, right by John Brown University.
Yes, that's where my brother learned to fly.
Your brother learned to fly on the airstrip at
Right.
JBU.
Yes.
Now, he was a student at JBU, is that right?
Yes, he was a student. He went to high school at JBU because it was available.
Yeah.
And we enrolled him in high school.
Yeah, at the John Brown Academy, I think.
That's correct.
Yeah. Do you remember what year he graduated from the academy?
I do not remember.
I'm guessing around 1939, 1940, something like that. Maybe?
Possibly.
Yeah. And then after the academy, he stayed
to go to college.
Go to college.
Right.
Did he get to finish college at JBU?
I assume that he did. I do not know that he finished.
Okay.
But I assume that he did because of some of the grades that he has made in the Air Force on the tests that he had to take.
I see. Okay. Do you know what year your brother? No, your brother's name is Henry.
Henry Donald.
Henry Donald Mitchell.
Yes, and he never did go by the name of Henry. That was his grandfather's, one of his grandfather's name.
Oh, okay.
But he never did go by Henry. He went by Don or Donald Mitchell.
Okay. Do you know what year he joined the military, the Army Air Corps?
No, I do not know the exact year, but it had to be when the draft started, because he and two of his buddies joined the Air Force because they didn't want to be drafted.
Oh, they wanted to have some choice.
They wanted to have some choice,
yeah.
And so he really enjoyed flying.
Yeah.
That was his thing.
So, was he a pilot then?
Yes, he taught flying at Starnes Flying Service in Conway.
Okay.
And
so this is before the war.
This is before the war.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. And so when he got into the Air Corps then, the Army Air Corps, what kind of plane did he fly?
Well, in primary you fly several different single-engine planes.
Yeah.
And he made extremely good grades in the Air Force and his testing. And he was, of his two other buddies, he's the only one that made fighter school. And you have to really score high to make fighter school.
Yeah.
The other two guys, one flew a B-17 and one flew a B-24.
Okay.
And they completed their missions in World War II, and they came back and visited with my family.
Yeah. Now, how about your brother?
Well, he was, the story, he was flying a mission. He was stationed in Italy, and they were flying a fighter sweep mission to Vienna, Austria, because Vienna, Austria was a big area of German factories manufacturing planes, and there was oil there.
Yeah.
And they were on a fighter sweep mission to Vienna, Austria. And he did not return from that mission.
This was in 1944?
1944.
Do you know the month off the top of your head?
He went down July the 8th, 1944.
July the 8th, 44. Do we know whether he was shot down or whether there was a malfunction or?
Okay, there's a story in the paper,
The article
that I gave you.
Yeah.
That tells about it, because they were in a fight with German aircraft.
Yeah.
And apparently he got back into formation, but the commander asked everybody to check in, and his name was Green 2, and he asked for Green 2, and he said, "I'm okay." And then when they looked around, he was gone. He went down. So apparently his plane had been hit, and he went down and just disappeared. And all this time, we didn't know where he was or where his plane was.
Yeah.
So,
So this was in 1944.
1944. So
Yeah.
what happened, Congressman Womack, who used to have an office right across the street here,
Yeah.
gave me the email address of a man in Vienna who was a member of a club, and their hobby was to look for downed aircraft.
Wow.
And they really found the crash site. And the problem is the owner of the land will not let anybody dig this plane up. They know where the crash site is, but the man that owns the land, it's in a heavily wooded area, and he will not let anyone dig it up.
Wow.
And that picture that you have of my family, this Marcus Riesner is the guy's name in Vienna, Austria. He suggested that I send a picture of my brother and family, and he was going to show it to this man, hoping it would soften his attitude.
Sort of a human touch.
Right.
Kind of thing. Yeah, yeah.
And that's the picture you have.
Yeah.
But it didn't work.
Really?
Now,
That's
I highly
incredible.
questioned whether this man was a Nazi sympathizer, because Germany controlled Austria at this
Sure,
time.
yeah.
And
Well, Hitler himself was an Austrian, wasn't
right.
he? Yeah.
And so what happened, when the Germans lost the war, this part of Austria was controlled by the Russians. So nobody could get in to do anything. So that's where we stand today.
Are you are certain though that the plane is on that property?
Yes, and the way they identified it, there were some parts to the plane on the surface.
Yeah.
Okay, they had serial numbers on them.
Yeah.
They called Lockheed, the manufacturer of the airplane in California,
Yeah.
and bingo, this was the airplane. We know it's the airplane.
Is there any indication you have that there are any remains?
We don't know. Now, Tom Holland said this. He said, "I don't believe there was any fire on board this crash because we didn't see any signs of a fire, and possibly the plane had run out of fuel."
So Americans apparently have, because Tom Holland, he's with the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, so apparently Americans have visited the plane. So
Just that one time.
that one time.
Right.
And this man in Austria, I don't know, has he told you what his rationale is? Why won't he?
No.
So this
In
is
fact, he's been very difficult to talk to about it, apparently.
yeah. it's mystifying.
Oh, yes.
I mean, the war ended a long time ago. You
Oh,
know,
yes. Oh, yes.
70 years ago, more than 70 years ago.
75 years ago.
Yeah, more than 70 years ago. Golly. Well, so what is your, if you could snap your finger and make something happen right now, what would you make happen?
I personally do not believe he was on the airplane.
You don't?
I knew my brother, and if he could have bailed out, he would have bailed out of that airplane. If it'd been out of fuel, he would have bailed out. So that really complicates it to the point. Now, if he did bail out, we don't know where he is.
Yeah, so if there are remains that can be found, they're somewhere else.
Right.
They're somewhere else in that area.
So that's the story.
So what, but I may have missed it if you just said it, but if you could have what you wish for tomorrow, so far as this goes, what would that be? To have the remains of the plane brought home at least?
Well, they wouldn't have to. That if there were any remains, yeah.
Sure.
Because he has a marker at the National Cemetery in Fayetteville.
He does, okay.
Which says missing in action.
Still, yeah.
Still.
He hasn't been accounted for.
And I talked to them at the National Cemetery, and they said, hey, if you have any remains, bring them, and we will have a full-fledged funeral.
Yeah.
So.
Is that the main thing for you? Just you really want to have the specific answer to that question?
Sure.
Are there some remains in the plane or close to the plane?
Well, we don't know.
That's what you want to know.
Yeah.
So it's not really the plane. It's the person is obviously more important.
Correct.
More important. Than
Correct.
The plane. And so there's the word that's often used is closure. You know, you want to sort of close the book or whatever the right image is. Is that? I mean, I've never experienced anything like that, where there's a big story in your life, a big story in your family, and there's a big question mark hanging over it. Is that kind of what it is for you?
Sure. I'm the last member of my family.
Yeah.
And I'm 89 years old.
Yeah.
So I don't have too long to enjoy having it settled. You know.
Yeah. It's really hard to believe that the government of Austria hasn't just said, look, we're going to, the U.S. is an ally, and we're going to.
Sure.
We need to find out what's going
That's
on.
what
we need to go to this
That's
site.
what we cannot figure out is why this man has this attitude. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, in one of these letters that I have from Marcus Reisner,
yeah,
one of these emails, he said that back during the war, on several occasions, if there was American pilots had bailed out and had landed, a lot of the people were so upset with the Air Force for all the bombing that they killed them and buried them. And where, we don't know. So that could have happened.
Does it occur to you that maybe that's what's going on here?
And it could have happened.
Do you know how old this man is in Austria?
I don't know. I do not know.
Obviously, for you, the best outcome would be to get to the site and to find something from Don that you can bring home and and have that sense that Don is home. That's the best outcome.
That's right. That's correct.
What would the next best outcome be?
I don't know. The next best outcome would be if he had bailed out, there's no telling where his remains are.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. How much, as you said, you're 89, this happens, the news, I imagine the news
75 years ago.
Yeah, news got to the family within a week or two, I'm guessing.
Oh, less than that.
That your brother was missing.
Missing in action, yes.
And I want to talk about that, but how much of a constant presence has this topic been in your mind since since that time?
Well, it's been on my mind, but it's becoming less and less now because I just have a feeling that he wasn't on that airplane.
That's your sense.
And so if that be true, I'm ready to close the file and forget it.
Yeah.
I won't forget it, but I mean forget trying to find it.
Yeah, but so what you said is, you know, if your sense is that your brother bailed out and, you know, isn't actually in the plane, then you know, that's what you want to know, but you can't know that unless we can actually get to the site. And for some mysterious reason, this person in Austria is being incredibly recalcitrant. It's just, I can't imagine what the rationale would be.
Well,
For that.
unless he is a Nazi sympathizer, and
Yeah.
he was an American, so
Yeah. About how old were you in 1944?
I was 13.
Okay.
I was 13 when he went down.
Yeah. Do you remember when your family got the news?
Oh yeah.
Can you tell us a
Well,
little
my
bit
mother
about
and
that?
father took it real hard.
Did the chaplain come to the door, or how did the news
No,
arrive?
the news came from two of his buddies in his tent in Italy. Got in touch, sent my mother and father a letter, and said
Wow.
he was missing. And then about 4 or 5 days after that, we got the notice to our house.
You got the telegram.
Right. So
Um,
we knew he was down.
Yeah.
We already knew it before we got word from the government.
How would you describe the impact of that on your family at the time?
It was hard on my mother and father, you know.
You know, you often hear stories of parents, I think especially moms, who they read what the telegram says, but they kind of hang on to hope that it was wrong. Do you
Yeah.
think your mom did that?
Well,
for a
yeah,
while?
I'm sure, but after several years, you give up.
Your family must have received letters from Don.
Yeah, I have a letter here that he wrote to my sister. It was in her stuff, of course she's passed, and he typed this on a typewriter, and I'm going to give it to you and let you have it.
Wow.
And it tells about some of the grades. You look at the date up at the top. It was in
Yeah.
1943,
Uh-huh.
and it will tell what all he did out. He was in California.
Santa Ana, California, it
Yeah,
says. Yeah.
and it will tell about some of his test scores
Uh-huh.
that he made on some of, and he made
Wow.
very high, and that's the reason he made fighter school, because he did well. August the 2nd, 1945.
Okay.
Dear Mr. Mitchell, with keen regard, I have learned that an official determination has been made of the death of your son, Second Lieutenant Henry Donald Mitchell, who has been missing in action since July the 8th, 1944 in Europe. My attention has been called to the fine record attended by Lieutenant Mitchell at Williams Field, and I feel that an eagerness to learn contributed immeasurably to the successful completion of his cadet training. Throughout his military career, unusual skill as a pilot and willingness to assume responsibility won the APPREOBATION of his superiors. The fellow officers and men of his unit deemed it a pleasure to serve with him, and they are saddened by his passing. It is my hope that you will view with pride your son's accomplishment and cherish the memory that he has made a valuable contribution for his country's cause. My heartfelt sympathy is with you and other members of your family in behalf of General H. H. Arnold, Commanding General, Army Air Force, who is temporarily away from headquarters. Signed, Ira C. Aker, Lieutenant General, U.S. Army, Deputy Commander, U.S. Air Force.
Well, Mr. Mitchell, thank you very much for telling us about your brother Don and about your efforts to recover him. Appreciate
Okay, well, I'm glad y'all came down.
that. Thank you.